I flew on a Lynx Air A320. Okay, not quite, but for the last couple of weeks, you may have noticed this blue and green Airbus A320 operating out of Calgary International Airport. This plane belongs to a relatively new American charter airline, Global Crossing Airlines, also called GlobalX. Due to more 737 MAX delivery delays, much like last year, Lynx Air has wet leased this single Airbus A320 for the summer, exclusively for some of their US flights out of Calgary. What also makes this kind of unique is the fact that GlobalX is also involved with another relatively new Canadian airline, Canada Jetlines. The two airlines actually merged in 2020 in their respective startup stages, and GlobalX began flying in 2021, offering charter and aircraft leasing services. They started with one Airbus A320, and their fleet has since grown to 12 A320 family aircraft. Jetlines themselves later began their operations in 2022 after being spun out from GlobalX. So, to recap, you have a kinda unique lease arrangement involving an all-Boeing operator and an A320, giving me the chance to fly on a lesser-known American charter airline with a strange Canadian connection, flying relatively cheap routes out of Calgary. Well, that sounds incredibly niche, and therefore something I had to try. I used a couple of travel credits I had, and booked myself a same-day return from Calgary to Los Angeles and back. Why two flights on the same plane? Well, I already stayed in LA with friends back in March, so didn't need the reminder of our exchange rate. Plus, this way I wouldn't have to worry about making a connection to another airline back home. Lynx Air uses the check-in areas at the far end of the international check-in hall. I had already printed off my boarding passes at home, as you're supposed to, so just went straight through security and to explain this nonsense to US Customs. Fortunately, they didn't see an issue, and off I went to go buy some overpriced snacks. Lynx doesn't have any sort of food to purchase on board, and I knew this flight wouldn't be any different, so I made sure to stock up. After walking down the length of Concourse E, our plane down to LA was parked over on a remote stand for the time being, the 16-year-old Airbus A320-200, registered as November 628 Victor Alpha. As you can tell by that registration, this plane first flew with Virgin America, being delivered in January of 2007. It was later transferred to Alaska Airlines at the start of 2018, and flew with them until the middle of 2020. GlobalX later took delivery of it in June 2022, and it's been flying with them since. This is also not the first time I've flown on a not-quite Lynx flight. Back in July last year, I flew on a wet-leased Canadian North 737 on a flight from Calgary to Victoria. Back then, they were very communicative about that fact, both in an email and with announcements on the plane. This time around, though, I didn't get any emails like that. That's a bit of a shame because I thought that was a really effective way to communicate the fact that your airplane does not say Lynx Air on it anywhere. Then again, there's nothing else to suggest that this isn't a Lynx flight, except for, well...
Yeah, that looks right.
Boarding eventually started right on time, and interestingly, the gate agents were actually policing priority boarding, which was good to see. It was soon my turn to hop on board, so let's go see what it's like flying GlobalX. My seat down to LA is the bulkhead row right in 1A. The bulkhead row on these planes has the newer style of Airbus bulkhead, with just a clear divider, but still plenty of space for me. I quickly got comfortable as everybody else made their way on board. The clear bulkhead is interesting though. I'm used to the older ones on Air Canada's A320s, where they have a closet there instead. Row 1 on the A320 also has the usual excellent view looking back at the wing.
Flight down at 615, operated by Global Crossing Airlines, service to LA. This time, right now numbers are finished boarding the cargo compartment, all bags, checking bags, we about finished the fuel.
The doors soon closed with 141 passengers on board, and we were off to California. Here's the departure from Calgary with some of that classic A320 engine buzz off of runway 35 left. After that beautiful, if not slightly bumpy departure over the city, here's a better look at the seat. The bulkhead row is much the same as any other, with a tray table in the armrest that flips open, slides, and rests at a decent height. In the pocket in front was this very nice looking GlobalX A320 safety card, and a generic air sickness bag. Very shortly, the foothills of the Rockies appeared as the cabin crew started the typical Lynx onboard service, giving out these cups of water. To be fair, that's not any different from any other time I've flown on Lynx, which certainly makes catering easier. It was a beautiful clear day across most of western North America, and the views below couldn't have been better. I knew I was going to be well occupied for the rest of the flight. Since catering on Lynx is very much bring your own, I grabbed some trail mix and a drink before I left. That, plus some downloaded episodes of one of my favorite YouTube series, Jetlag, pretty much had me set for the next little bit. We made our way across the border, and I took in the sights over Idaho. It might just be me, but a clear day and interesting landscapes like this are the best sort of in-flight entertainment I can have. Those views only continued to impress as we flew further south, passing briefly into eastern Oregon and Nevada. I love flying over this part of the States. The scenery is just so different from what I'm used to in Alberta. Another water service took place around the halfway mark of the flight as we passed over Naval Air Station Fallon in western Nevada. GlobalX's A320s have a few different layouts depending on the plane. On today's flight, they had 180 seats in a standard all-economy configuration. Interestingly though, they list this plane as having only 179, with one random seat in the second last row missing. I can confirm it is physically there. The aft galley area is kind of interesting too. Both aft lavatories are in the rear wall of the cabin, and there's just a small galley forward of that on the right side. Those aft lavatories are surprisingly roomy, but not very well lit. Back in my seat, the views did not quit as we passed over the Sierra Nevada mountains. The seatbelt sign eventually came back on as we began our descent into Los Angeles. Here's the arrival into LAX with some more great views of the city, landing on runway 24 right.
GlobalX welcomes you to Los Angeles where the local time is 7:10 p.m. Please remain seated with your seatbelt securely fastened and all carry-on items stowed. Thank you for choosing Lynx Air operated by GlobalX as your air carrier, and we do look forward to having you on board with us soon. Thank you.
So, with about an hour and a half on the ground here, I needed to figure out what to do with myself. Fortunately, Lynx Air uses the Tom Bradley International Terminal here at LAX, which meant easy views of lots of interesting international visitors. Plus, because you clear customs in Calgary, that means you're basically treated as a domestic flight upon arrival. We parked at the newest part of TBIT, the West Gates, a satellite concourse connected to the existing gates by a tunnel. This new concourse opened just over 2 years ago, and it is a remarkably nice terminal. It's bright, open, and added some much-needed international capacity to the airport. Some of the gates have fantastic close-up views of planes too, including this North Atlantic Airways 787, Saudi A777, and French B A350. However, there were quite a few more parked over at the original TBIT gates. Sadly, I got as far as the escalators to walk through the tunnel when there was a terminal-wide announcement that boarding was starting early for the flight back to Calgary. Not wanting to take any chances, I quickly headed back up there. With another 20 minutes, I probably could have made it, but I also wanted to go home to my own bed tonight, so back I went. On this flight, I sat a bit further back in row 4. Seat 4A was, predictably for an all-economy A320, a little bit tight, but nothing I wasn't expecting. It also became pretty clear how the turnaround was so quick. I still had a great view out the window as we waited for the last couple of passengers. I also realized that these seats are the same ones that Jetlines has on their A320s, which are not the softest, but do get the job done. In GlobalX's type of work, specifically this sort of wet lease arrangement, it's not like they need to do too much except have the airplane there when another airline badly needs one. Unfortunately, even with boarding half an hour early, they were still waiting for people as we passed our original boarding time. They still closed the door 15 minutes early, so that was certainly a win. What was even more of a win was that I ended up with the whole row to myself. We pushed back and taxied out to runway 24 left right around sunset, and I knew we were in for quite the golden hour once we got above the clouds. Well, that West Coast sunset did not disappoint in the least. I'm glad that timing worked out like it did. For this flight, I pretty much just admired that sunset, settled in, and stretched out for the next little while. That included more downloaded videos and some hastily purchased food and drink from the terminal in LAX to keep me going until I got home. More water was also given out twice during the flight. Now, if you're anything like me and you want to fly on one of these very oddly specific flights yourself, they're not too hard to find. GlobalX seems to be flying exclusively between Calgary and Los Angeles, and Calgary and Las Vegas on various days of the week. Lynx doesn't exactly show you the aircraft type right on the flight selection page, but if you go to the seat map and find one that has a full first row, plus exit rows at row 12 and 14, that's a GlobalX A320. For comparison, normal Lynx 737 seat maps have just half of a first row, and exit rows at 15 and 16. As of now, GlobalX will be operating for Lynx up until the middle of August. That said, I could see them extending that if they don't get another new plane by then. Regardless, this seemingly pointless joyride was a fun way to try out a new airline that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to fly in scheduled service. The early boarding in LA paid off too, as we ended up arriving at the gate in Calgary almost 45 minutes early. I know Lynx does pad their scheduled flight times quite a bit, but it was still good to see. The GlobalX cabin crew on board were all super friendly, if not a little confused as to why someone would do this for fun. Really though, it's just about sharing these sorts of unique aviation experiences that normal people wouldn't necessarily spend time on. In just a couple of years, the time that Lynx leased an A320 will probably just be a footnote in the history book of Canadian aviation, but that is why these random flights appeal to me. I do wish GlobalX all the best, and I'm glad I got to try them out once on a not-so-likely route. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this trip report, and I will see you in the next one.